Greetings, Father Joe here, your friendly neighborhood pastor, coming to you from St. Patrick's Church in lovely Highland Mills, New York. Today is the 24th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and we are calling this a breakfast homily. Farmer Smith owns a farm. He has chickens and he has pigs, and the chicken says to the pig, "Hey, Farmer Smith is so good, we should make him breakfast." And the pig says, "Oh, that's easy for you to say. You're just involved. I'm committed." Love that joke. Involved versus committed. Jesus is speaking to the disciples, and he asks them first for just a little bit of involvement. He says, "Who do people say that I am?" In other words, other people. You don't have to believe this, but what are other people saying? And they say, "Oh, John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the other prophets." But then Jesus asks them to commit themselves. He says, "And you, who do you say that I am?" And St. Peter says, "You are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God." By the way, this gets expanded in other Gospels, but then Jesus says, all right, now that you're committed, I'm going to let you know what's in store. The Son of Man, he's going to suffer. He's going to be rejected. He's going to be killed. And on the third day, he's going to rise again. I don't think that St. Peter heard that. That's why I covered my mouth. St. Peter probably stopped hearing on the suffering or the rejected, maybe on the killed, but definitely did not hear the rise again on the third day. And so he rebukes Jesus. If somebody told you they were going to go suffer and rejected and be killed, you would probably try to talk them out of it. And so that's what St. Peter does. But Jesus, in turn, rebukes St. Peter. He says, "Get behind me, Satan." I mean, that's really a serious response. Wow. He says, "You're not thinking like God, you're thinking like human beings." And this is going to be really important if we are committed to following Jesus, to be committed disciples. We have to think the way God does, not the way human beings do. So, St. Peter is not yet ready to be committed. Now, I'm going to talk about two different ways that we can avoid being committed, or the two things that will keep us from actually being committed. The first one comes from our second reading from James. James says that faith without works is empty. And I'm going to call this, just for practical sake, I'm going to call that fantasy. Sometimes people say, "Well, I am a Christian," or "I believe in Jesus," and they don't live it out. I had dinner with somebody, this is a few years back. Went to a really nice restaurant, and during the meal, he says to me, "In my spiritual life, I'm ready to be crucified with Christ." Now, I had had a few drinks, and so my response, I do not recommend. It was not polite. It was not charitable. But I said, "Oh, yeah, well, that doesn't mean anything, because nobody's going to crucify you. Pick something from daily life." I did not realize that was going to be a prophetic statement until the end of the dinner, and they came out with the dessert. And dessert wasn't what he expected. And he was very upset with the waiter, and he said, "Call the manager over." And he said, "Listen, did Andre do this?" He knew the chef's name, which I don't think was actually Andre. But he said, "Did Andre do this?" And the manager said, "Yeah, from time to time we try to rotate the menu." And he says, "Well, you should go back to the old way. This is wrong. I'm very upset." And just in the back of my head, I'm thinking, all right, so you would be crucified with Christ. I did not say this out loud, nor should I have said it out loud. So great, you're going to be crucified with Christ. You're willing to have this horrendous suffering, but you can't put up with not getting the dessert that you want. So the first thing that I think keeps us from being committed is this fantasy that I am committed. Boy, I am so committed. I'm willing to do anything. And then the first thing that we're called on to do, well, we don't do it. So it's very difficult to be a follower of Jesus if we have faith but no works, if we have this fantasy but not the reality. The other thing that can keep us from being committed disciples or followers of Jesus, if we go to our first reading, the prophet Isaiah, Isaiah says that the Lord has opened my ears so that I might hear. So God has given us this grace, this calling. It's a challenge, but God gives us this so that we can hear. And Isaiah says, and I have not rebelled, and I have not turned my back. Jesus tells Peter basically that Peter's going to have to suffer and be rejected and be killed. And Peter doesn't want to hear any of that. And so Jesus tells him, he says, if you want to follow me, first, you need to deny yourself. Second, you need to take up your cross. And third, you need to follow me. So it starts off with denying myself. What are little things in my life that I can choose that will deny me something? This past week, I was watching too much television, so I had to disconnect my Apple TV. Not a huge thing. And I didn't unplug it forever. I just said, for right now, I need to not spend that much time. And by the way, and I did it poorly. As soon as last night, so maybe 2 or 3 days later, without even thinking about it, I started watching YouTube videos, which it's the same as watching television. I'm just doing it on a smaller screen. But I didn't even think about that until this morning. And this morning I said, oh my gosh, I was going to avoid television, and I fell flat on my face. And so I'm going to work at it again. This time I may be more specific. I'm not going to watch television, on certain nights, or I'm going to limit it to a certain amount. But denying myself is something that I choose. All right? So I choose to give up meat during Lent, or meat on Fridays, or I'm going to, if you're a kid, I'm going to not play my video game for an hour or two. If you're a parent, I'm going to give up something to be a better parent or a better spouse, or if you're a single parent, I'm going to, with the single parent, I kind of feel like the denying myself is actually saying I need to take some time by myself. I'm going to deny taking care of my kid for a couple of hours. Whatever it looks like in your life to say, I'm going to deny myself something for a little while. The picking up your cross, that's usually something you don't choose. So if you go out to a fancy restaurant and they don't have your dessert, it sounds really small, but that can be carrying your cross. Could be something big. Maybe you have a chronic illness. Maybe you're in pain. Maybe you've lost a loved one, and so you're mourning and you're living, without that person. Those are crosses that we are called to bear. And what prepares us for carrying that cross is denying myself. Again, not huge things. Start out small. But it's only when we have been denying ourselves, when we have a habit or a pattern of picking up our cross, only then can we really become a follower of Jesus. In the first reading from Isaiah, I have not rebelled, I have not turned my back. This is really important as we're coming out of this, hopefully coming out of this pandemic, and we're inviting people to come back to church. And some people are saying, well, I didn't have to go last year. Why do I have to go this year? Or I can stay home and watch it on television. When we do that, we rebel. we turn back from God. Or if you want to put it in the context of the gospel today, I'm not thinking the way God is, but the way human beings do. And this year we told parents in our religious ed program that they're going to have to come to church. Well, they're going to have to bring their kids to church. And we caught a lot of flack about this. But what good does it do to teach people the truths of Christ and then not tell them the importance of going to Mass? Basically, we're giving a mixed message. We're saying that, yes, Jesus is the Savior. Yes, Jesus has a plan to save you. And then saying, but this whole thing about going to Mass, you can do whatever you want. That's thinking as a human. That's turning my back on God. And when we do that, we are incapable of commitment. And so we have a very difficult situation here. We're telling parents, oh, it's important that you go to religious ed, but then we're not telling them the importance of Mass. And so we're actually setting up a situation where they are teaching their children to rebel. They're teaching their children or giving them a habit. Some parents say, well, I'm not gonna, teach my kids religion or do this. I'll let them decide when they are an adult. That's teaching them something. That is teaching them to rebel. That is teaching them to turn their back. You can't say that this is the truth, that I am a follower of Jesus, and then say, but it doesn't have a practical impact in my life, or it doesn't have a practical impact in the life of my kids. That is simply rebelling. So it is challenging today. We are called with Peter and the disciples to follow Jesus. And the only way that we're going to be able to accept is sometime in the future suffering or rejection or even being killed or being martyred is if we deny ourselves, if we take up our cross whenever we have one in our life, and if we follow Jesus. So be a good pig, be committed. Don't be a chicken. Don't settle for involvement. Be committed to Jesus as his follower. That's what we are called to do. That's actually our invitation. God bless you.